Thanks for staying with us. The federal government has announced an over 100% increase in school fees at federal government colleges, otherwise known as federal unity colleges. As contained in a directive from the Office of the Director of Senior Secondary Education, Department of the Federal Ministry of Education, students are mandated to pay 100,000 naira from next term, as against the old tuition fee of 45,000 naira. It is reported that the new fees will have a ripple effect on virtually all aspects and activities of the school, including tuition and boarding fees, uniforms, textbooks, deposits, exercise books, prospectus, caution fees, ID cards, stationery, clubs, and societies, including sports and extra lessons, amongst others. The House of Representatives had urged the federal government to reverse the increment of school fees in all federal government-owned secondary schools.
The situation across the nation is bad, but that of BUK is particularly worse because the increment is even more than by 100%. They increase the school fees. People that are paying 32,000 naira before, they have to pay the 100 now. People that are paying 42,000 naira before, they have to pay 170 now.
I've not paid my school fees, and I've not even have any assurance that I will pay the school fees. Thousands of students are at the verge of losing their admission and their studentships toward this hiking school fees, and people are not really happy with it.
We plead on the management of Bio University Kano to please split the payments into 2 semesters. First semester we pay like 60%, and second semester we pay like 40%. At least this way, it's going to help a lot of people. Okay,
let's discuss this new issue further, as we are now joined by Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, who is a RISE analyst and the Deputy Dean School of Postgraduate Studies at Bayes Universities. Very warm welcome, Prof. Well, let's not call it a season of anarchy yet, but it's a season, that really asphyxiates the people. I mean, when you talk of the fuel price increase, then you talk of living conditions of Nigerians, and now we're talking about increasing school fees, both in secondary schools and in federal tertiary institutions. How do you aggregate all of this?
Yeah, no doubt, Christian. Thanks for having me. No doubt, I agree with you. There are clouds in the horizon, and of course, it needs some excellent statesmanship, bricksmanship for the governments, the institutions, and for parents to be able to navigate these clouds, as the case could be. But the onus largely lies with the government. Now we have a new government that is trying to liberalize as much things as possible. The naira is being floated, subsidy is being removed, and there's one other one. Essentially, they're just trying to create a market economy so that the forces of demand and supply will determine the prices of things, as the case could be. That's one aspect of it. What it will translate definitely to is increase in prices of goods and services, like we're beginning to see. The second aspect of it is that we have public institutions, essentially educational institutions that are also trying to survive in the face of limited subvention or allocation from government. And of course, they have bills to pay, they have institutions to maintain, and one source of revenue is fees, And the third leg of it, they're not thinking that, okay, how would they survive if allocation is limited? How would they mitigate it, if they do not increase fees? And I'm thinking that, okay, let's jack up fees. But in doing that, they also forget that there's a third leg, which is the students. And what class of students are we talking about? Students that are largely vulnerable. Most of them are from poor homes. Most of them who were struggling even before now to pay the fees that was already on ground, and now there's about 100% or so increase now. So there's difficulty across board, difficulty on the part of government, difficulty on the part of the institutions, and difficulty, or even greater difficulty on the part of the students who are much more vulnerable. But like I said, the onus is still on government to make some quick interventions. And there are different ways in which they can intervene at the level of tertiary institutions. We know there are funds available somehow through intervention agencies, through TED Fund, through UBEC, and maybe any other intervention agency at all. what can be done in the circumstance? Probably say, okay.
There's the
now,
Student Loan Act now.
Before we get there,
okay,
I'm just building the argument.
All right.
Before we get to the act, in the meantime, the Student Loan Act has not been activated yet. We just had the announcement, which we all saluted, but it is yet to start. I'm not aware that anybody has collected the loan, and of course, the picture is not there. We have not heard from students who are collecting it, so we just assume that it's just a plan in the bag, which is yet to be let out. But in the circumstance, we are saying that all intervention agencies can probably be told in the circumstance, maybe if it is possible, right, to jettison the capital expenditure they are always following, focusing on, embarking on.
Well, you have to look at the act establishing the intervention agencies, to jettison. I mean, TET Fund, for example.
Yeah,
basically,
the act was there. Yeah. TET Fund act is always there, but oftentimes they also shift their paradigm. At the time, they were focusing on capital expenditure. Then later on, they now thought about focusing on soft projects like research, like sponsoring scholarship, and all such things. So in addition to that, I'm saying that, there can be some financial re-engineering such that they could be increased allocation to the universities, just to help them have more allocation and probably help them mitigate the pains they are facing from financial crunch that is making them to increase the school fees, where many of our students will become vulnerable students, will not be able to pay, and they will drop out of school. Because that's a very dangerous thing. If students begin to drop out of school on account of not being able to pay school fees, the domino effect is going to have, either in the short or in the long time, on the overall society. And we're in a system where there's no concrete alternative for people who can't go to university. In other climes, there are rooms for apprenticeship. And of course, they'll follow this direction and even become accomplished, fulfilled in life. But we're yet to get to that level where there's a concrete alternative to university education or higher or tertiary education, as the case could be. Because we don't have that, we're still concentrating on this university education. And we should not risk outcasting a lot of students who are vulnerable such that they drop out of school. And do not forget, in the future, so many things may come out of it. Crime, distrust in the system, hopelessness, and of course, you do not know where this will take us to. And that's why we're saying that, yes, government, again, we may not want to blame government completely because we probably are doing some engineering, hoping that in the long term it may benefit us all. But we're saying that in doing this engineering, we've got to be careful as well and take care of that angle, because systems and societies are measured by the level of attention given to the poor, the vulnerable. Those are the lower rung, the anecdotal lower rung, the economic ladder. Yeah. It's very, very important. And of course, if you do not attempt to do this one well, that society is tending towards a failed state, because those ones can come around and harm the system, as the case could be.
Well, and the society, a lot of people, are going about and say, let the poor breathe. How will the poor breathe in all of this when the palliatives are not in place and the people are hearing their leaders that they are going to buy SUVs worth 70 billion. Principal officers are going to be given 40 billion, for their own SUVs. They still see government convoys, 22 cars. How do you carry such a people along in such a hopeless, helpless situation?
Yeah, that's actually a very tricky one, and that's the point we've also been making, that if we are asking the people to make sacrifice, we are simply saying that they should make more sacrifice, because by default, they're already making sacrifice, and even in recent times, they're making more sacrifices because, of course, they're trying to cope with increase in PMS price. They're trying to cope with the absence of electricity. They are practically coping with, they're also coping with insecurity. So many things that people are beginning, like we often hear jokes on social media, people are now trekking more, not the kind of trekking that you do because you want to exercise, but you are trekking as a result of compulsion. So, I mean, psychologically, you are stressed as a Nigerian.
In an empty stomach.
Perhaps, so these are the times are difficult, and we're asking them to make more sacrifice. But if you're asking people to make sacrifice, of course, you've got to show some examples. I think there was a pointer to that when the governor said that at the subnational level, there should be attention to cost of government. The cost of government should be reduced. That was said, but oftentimes, and like I've said severally on this show, we have a policy pronouncement, policy direction, but implementation is often a bane, and even far beyond implementation, it is that there's no attention to evaluation at all. So most of the times, these policy pronouncements, they just end at the level of pronouncement, perhaps to play to the gallery, a form of gratifying themselves, for leaders to gratify themselves to the populace, to endear themselves, and we don't make any progress until there's another cycle of pronouncement come. That cycle has to be broken. That chain of failed promises, failed policy plans, projections, has to be broken so that we can see execution. And this is the time that we really need it, because I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu should consider himself lucky, because I've not seen anyone I've not seen any president who has been deliberate about ascending Nigeria's presidents, who ascended it quite all right, came up, with very drastic policies like this, and hasn't been resisted through protestations, through people marching onto the streets and disrupting the peace of the system.
You don't think the momentum is building?
Well, and that's the point I'm making. If it were before now, from previous regimes, we'll have seen, even in the times of Obasanjo, who was a little more gung-ho, people didn't wait for 50 days or nearly 2 months before they began to take action. But President Bola Tinubu is lucky this time, hopefully, but that luck shouldn't be taken too far. And what he can do is to come in quickly, find ways of mitigating the ongoing pain, so that we will not have endless protestation. And of course, when protests start, sometimes it can be very difficult to mention the dimension, because you may say you want to quell it, you will be juggling between peaceful quelling and, of course, violent, and you cannot really tell, really. So
the dimension it will take.
It will take. I think the citizens are peaceful enough, but they shouldn't be taken for a ride.
Yeah, you spoke about intervention agencies and the rest that can mitigate or cushion these tough times that Nigerians are going through socioeconomically. Agencies like the Rural Electrification Agency, for example, that is supposed to drive development, like was seen in Taraba, where some farmers there have been empowered. Giving them electricity is going to propel, agricultural development there. In 1 minute, you want to see more of that from intervention agencies.
Yeah. I think that's a very, very, very good example. More of that, and of course, we have many of these agencies around the corner, not just at the federal level, but at the state level. There are plenty of them, What also matters is sincerity. And that should be added to it is, of course, security. And from what we're seeing from what the military chiefs are doing, quite commendable, but again, it shouldn't just be, something they show us at the start, at the beginning, then along the line, they drop the ball. We want to see a sustenance of the momentum so that we can probably have greater level of peace. And of course, when there's peace, what can come.
There's plenty of development. Thank you very much, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, a Rise analyst and Deputy Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Bayes University here.